So, but you've been carrying this torch. I was trying to think when, first of all, you have been doing this for how many years? Since
Uh,
what, like 2012 or something?
2012. Yeah, that was the year of the Mayan, supposed Mayan apocalypse. Well,
Yeah, that's right. It's good. And but I think were you on my podcast or Amazon Video then? I think maybe it was like 2015 or something,
it
14.
was fairly early on. I can't recall that far
Yeah,
back, whether it was
yeah,
2012 or
yeah, yeah,
2014.
yeah. Me neither. Um, but it seems like a long time, and we've had
Sure it is.
a lot of great conversations. And I'm delighted that you're still doing this. This is obviously a very, very important continuing record of the importance of Philip K. Dick in all aspects of science fiction. But of course, you are focused on the films, the many films that he had made of his work, and also the many more people who have made films of all sorts that fall under the same incredibly interesting umbrella that Phil Oaks, that Philip K. Dick, Phil Oaks also the folk singer, but that Philip K. Dick created. So why don't we start by your telling us again, and we'll repeat this when we conclude our discussion, exactly when and where this 2026 convention will take place, and also tell us in what way it will be different. Because I know you're always injecting like new things into these events.
Well, the festival takes place March 13th through 14th
Okay.
in New York City. It will be held primarily at Cinema Village or Cinema 123 by Angelica, and also at the Producers Club. Um, the films are we got some really interesting films this year. Every year, as you know, the films that we cover are from all over the world, and we really have an amazing lineup. We have films from all countries and ethnicities, everything from South African to Native American to it's really impressive. It's an impressive collection, and we try to include stories as they're filtered, as their science fiction is filtered through the culture. So that's really very important for us because we all used to the regular plain vanilla type science fiction that comes out of Hollywood, but often the more interesting kind of science fiction is the one that's filtered through the lenses of the people who are of different cultures, of different backgrounds, or different countries. So we definitely seeing some different nuances, which is very makes the whole subject that more refreshing. I think what makes this year very special is, for one thing, our usual lineup of best of PKD shorts sometimes falls a little bit short of PKD and more in shorts. But this year, I'm really happy to have four films that deal directly with PKD specifically out of the seven in our block. Two of them are based on stories. Um, First one is called The Gun, which both of these stories were written. They're part of the um, they're in public domain now. The first one is The Gun, which I think was written in the late 50s, and the other one is the I think Beyond the Door, which is about a grandfather clock that has unusual personalities. So and then in addition, we got a featurette. Um, it's based on a character whose life is being invaded by a Valus transmission, a virus from outer space, and he literally calls it Valus. So, and then the fourth one is sort of a hybrid AI film that deals with Ubik and how Ubik represents ontological reality decay. So it's really interesting, very philosophical in nature. And I think for those who are into finding films that are specifically influenced by PKD, I think they'll find that block really, really interesting. You might be aware that over the years we always had panels, right, in our festival, and for the last couple of years we've had a hard time coming out with a panel. So, but this year we have a film. It's called Past Life. Now it features the well-known actor Jeremy Piven, probably best known from Entourage, but other films like Spy Kids and Grosse Point Return and so on. But he plays a hypnotist who helps uncover a case of someone who was a serial killer, or presumably has reincarnated from a serial killer, so using past life regression. So it occurred to me that that's a very popular theme. It occurred to me to have someone on board to follow up after the film, a panel on past life regression, and how, and sort of compare and contrast how the movie represents past life regression therapy versus how it really happens. It really happened to have someone who is gonna join us that day. This film, by the way, this features an international premiere. Never seen before here in the States. So I'm really excited to have that. But we also have some amazing features. We got this film called Volume 7. It's written by two Greek directors. And I think I would say, the closest stylistic comparison is to those who are familiar with Dark City by Alex Proyas. It's black and white, but it deals with a world where time is circular, and people are starting to break away from oblivion. And it's very cerebral, to put it this way. And it's really for those who really want to sink their teeth into good old hard sci-fi. This would be the film for that. We have another film called The Uncertainty Principle. It was the cinematography was inspired by The Conversation, Francis Ford Coppola. So it's black and white. It's almost like takes place in the 70s, but it's about a group of scientists. And by the way, this film is Romanian in origin, directed by a Romanian director. It takes place in the 70s, where a group of scientists discover the creation of a wormhole. So even though it's taking place in the 70s, it takes place currently. The vibe is from the 70s, stylistic. So it's the characters who are finding something unusual that leads them to think they may have created a wormhole in the quantum mechanics, the uncertainty principle, and so on. So we have a few other films. I think one of them is Blockhead. That's also, I believe, is a premiere. It's about a character who finds his double in a character in a script that he has written. So the character that he has written, that script, becomes a kind of like an alter ego for himself. Yeah. So we have several documentaries on UFOs. And of course, we got a lineup of many, many shorts from all over the world, from Spain, Italy, South Africa, the Netherlands, US, UK, so you name it, we have it.
Let's talk a little bit about UFOs. As much as I love alternate history and time travel, which we'll get back to, but as I'm sure you know, UFOs have been very much in the news. I mean, they've always been in the news since at least the 1950s, even earlier.
Right.
But they've become, and this is one of the things that social media, one of the many things that social media are making very popular. So much so that my daughter was talking to me about UFOs like a couple of months ago. And I said, "Where did you get all this interest in UFOs?" And she was saying, "Well, it's all over social media." So are the UFO, is just one UFO movie, or will there be a few of them in the film festival?
Yeah, I suspect there'll be two right now. At least one is a documentary that focuses exactly on it covers the UFO from the Roswell incident all the way to the present going on in the Congress investigations and so on. So the angle it takes is a big component of UFO. There's a psyop that has been deliberately created to misdirect the public for reasons unknown, but clearly there's something there that they're using deliberately to misdirect the public away from perhaps very advanced weapons or covert operations. Who knows? But very interesting subject. It's called Saucers, Crooks, and Cooks.
That's a good title. Well,
Yes.
apropos of the president, I have to tell you, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers will be interested in this if they're interested in UFOs. The late Mike Resnick, I don't know if you knew him or heard of him. One of the many things that he did was he edited a whole bunch of science fiction anthologies, including one of my favorite anthologies I've ever read called Alternate Presidents. And again, I'm sure many of our viewers are too young to even know who Michael Dukakis was. I'm not even sure if he's still alive. You probably have heard of Michael
Yeah,
Dukakis.
sure.
He, uh, he was running for president, I guess, in the late 1980s. So Barry Malzberg had a fabulous little story there in Mike Resnick's book, Alternate Presidents, in which Dukakis, is inaugurated. He goes to the White House. Pretty much the first thing he does is someone tells him, okay, we need to go downstairs now. And they take an elevator deep down below whatever the real floor of the White House is. And then he gets on like a little sort of a small train that goes moving way underground, gets off the train and walks into a room where there are a bunch of aliens, just typical aliens, like, with antlers coming out of their head and, the kinds of things we see in Star Trek and Star Wars, etc. And Dukakis, the president, takes off his mask, and it turns out he's, one of the aliens himself. Which, if you remember Michael Dukakis, the guy did seem rather strange. I never met him in person the way he talked. So Barry Malzberg really had a good view of what Dukakis might really have been. Who knows?
Knows,
Yeah.
yes.
But let's get back to time travel and alternate history. You mentioned a few minutes ago the importance of international movies and television shows. And it just so happens, just in the last couple of days, I came across a note someplace about a television series made in Spain, a Spanish television series. Uh, the English translation of the title is Ministry of Time, and it ran for about 3 seasons, actually, right around the time that the Philip K. Dick Film Festival was started by you. So, did you ever do anything with that back in 2012, 13?
No, it's interesting because, as you know, we were working with the Cervantes Institute in New York, but
Right.
we were showing films, features or shorts from Spain or from Latin America. But no, I never worked with that series, Ministry
Interesting.
of Time.
Yeah, I never even heard of that series, and which is amazing because I pride myself on knowing just about everything there is. Yeah, basically, the fundamental idea, of course, like many ideas in science fiction, was first really popularized by Isaac Asimov and his novel from the late 1950s, The End of Eternity, which I highly recommend. And by the way, there's been no American or British or English version movie or television series ever made of The End of Eternity. But there was believe it or not, a great little movie made in the Soviet Union back in the early 1980s. Anyway, anyone who's familiar with Asimov knows that what The End of Eternity is all about are a group called the Eternals, whose job it is to basically police time throughout history to make sure no one goes back and does something that messes up history. And so, Ministry of Time, it basically starts off with that premise. I have no idea where it goes and how it gets there, but I'm certainly very interested in seeing it. I mean, you probably know Stephen Hawking is famous for his chronology protection conjecture, which basically argues that the universe would never allow itself to get so messed up to have timelines changed. And so basically the very nature of the universe would create some kind of physical force that, in Stephen Hawking's words, would make life safe for historians. In other words, whatever history that they know about and have been researching. And I don't know, you probably know about this because I try to talk to you about this every time. I actually wrote a novelette, The Chronology Protection Case, which was made into a very low budget short film. You can see it on Amazon Prime, and actually a pretty high budget audiobook. So that's why I'm so interested in Ministry of Time. And as far as alternate history is concerned, have you ever, and I'm sure I've, mentioned this to you in previous conversations, and I think it would be a great thing if you could get anyone who has been directly associated with, has contributed to For All Mankind, right? The alternate history series that's on Apple TV. And for anyone who's not familiar with that, it's just, based, and this is the way most alternate histories are, just one little premise. The Soviets wind up beating us, the United States, to the moon in the 1960s. And that changes everything. Uh, because of that, for example, the space program continues, uh, unlike what happened where pretty much stopped going anywhere
Right.
after the voyages to the moon. And I don't know, you may have read, I just saw the other day, the Artemis 2 launch that's been postponed again until April or May or even later. That would be the first ship that would bring people not landing on the moon, but at least circling the moon in a very long time. Um, but basically, the alternate history in For All Mankind is really excellent. Michael Moore, who played a very large role both in the revamp of Battlestar Galactica, and before he did that, he did a lot of work in the Star Trek universe. He's the main force behind that. So I would highly recommend that to anybody who's watching this or listening and you enjoy alternate history. And I would just hope that you should try. If I knew him, I would tell him to contact you, but I don't know him personally.
Yeah, sure. That would certainly be an interesting. I'll keep an eye for that. The story of the Ministry of Time kind of reminds me a little of the Adjustment Bureau.
Right.
One of Philip K. Dick's is about these overseers who make sure that people don't, mess up the timelines. And then so I mean, obviously, that was made into a movie with Matt Damon a few years ago, which was pretty good adaptation from the book itself, from the novella. So, from the story rather, and that's really a indication of where PKD is heading. So, but yes, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea of multiple realities or coexisting multiple realities, which is really what PKD talks about. That it's not about past, universal, future. It's about multiple realities at the same time, and he's flipping back and forth between realities. That's it's always been an interesting topic and to explore.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the most interesting topics, because, if only because everyone, when they think back in the history of their lives, they can imagine, well, if I had not done this, if I had done that, how would my life have played out differently? I might have gotten a completely different job. I might be living in a completely different place.
Right.
And, the exciting thing about alternate history is, if you think about it, right, every minute that we live and have any interaction with anyone, there are all kinds of like little micro decision points. And if we did something a tiny bit different, that could have great results in the future. So, by the way, I'm glad to hear you're having a panel about that movie. And Jeremy Piven, of course, is an actor who's very well known to me. I was a big fan of Entourage. I thought he was fabulous. Um, his character in Entourage was said to be based on, I can't remember anyone's name.
I think it's the Emmanuel, like he was a brother or a famous agent in Hollywood.
Yes, there's a famous agent in Hollywood.
Yes,
One of the brothers is a doctor, and the other brother is a politician. I mean,
that's it. Yeah.
yeah.
So, no,
The,
he's actually a very, very good actor. I mean, the roles I've seen him in, and it's he's been doing stage and movies from since he was like 10 years old. And unfortunately, his career was a bit derailed by certain accusations, and he felt part of that. And hopefully, this will be his comeback. I mean, I believe that he's working on another film, but this is his major feature since then. So I think that, and based upon early reviews, people have seen it internally. They think it's really a good film, a good feature. So he's really well. He's a good actor.
well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, both because of the subject matter and, yeah, as I just said, I think he's an excellent actor. I mean, he really lit up that show, Entourage. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that this is the over the years what we've done is explore. If you look back, I'm not sure we were, if you look back, a lot of the work we did back in 2017, we were ahead of the curve. Before the Montauk project became Stranger Things, right? We already did a show, a panel on the Montauk project back in 2015. Before the whole UFO UAP back in 2017, we had some of the leading ufologists, Jacques Vallée and Al Puthoff, at our festival. So I think that I'm really happy that in some ways we're able to tap the pulse of what's going on. I'm not saying that the next big thing is going to be past live regression, but it's something different. I mean, we've done remote viewing, we've done aliens, of course, and parallel realities. But we had our interview, the panel with Ronald D, who's currently finding a way of sending particles back in time, electrons or photons. So, I mean, well, this is where science and science fiction meet in a very interesting and very exciting zone that we need to explore more of that kind of that fringe element, not quite science fiction, but not quite science. I mean, it's right there, and I think that's where there's a lot to learn. On the subject of aliens, I think the most interesting thing that's happening is not the kind of monsters or aliens you would see like from other planets, but what's being referred to as non-human intelligences, which are non-corporeal, and that they take different forms. Like at one moment they may show up as a gray, another moment they may show up Sasquatch, another moment they may show as some saint, and that's the cutting edge in the UAP world. Not so much, these guys coming all the way from Alpha Centauri, and then they happen to hit our atmosphere and they just drop. The plane crashes. That's a joke. I mean, that's really is funny when you think about it. I mean, I think that everything is there is very intentional, set up to create a psyop, or maybe some people are saying there's being planted that this technology that supposedly we have has been gifted to us by these people. So the whole thing is taking on almost an other than worldly kind of feel, and I wouldn't be surprised in the future. And by the way, talking about the future, there's a reboot of the X Files coming. I
I
was
just saw a note about
Yeah.
that somewhere online. That should be exciting.
Yes, because there's a lot of stuff has happened since the X Files ended, uh,
Right.
and hopefully this new reboot will pick up, where it left off. Because science fiction never stops growing and evolving. And that's the thing that's why I tell writers, keep on writing, keep on reading, keep on not just working on the latest AI, but really do your homework, write good fiction or good nonfiction, because that's the bread and butter. I mean, with a good story, good packaging, these archetypes are eternal. They'll never, as long as you know how to repackage them, people will always want to see more of that. And I think that's why we also have we have a screenwriting competition in the festival, not just because anyone. Let's face it, today anyone with a camera, with a red camera, can do some. If they know what they're doing, they can do some pretty amazing effects. But as to tell a good story that is entertaining, that still requires some work, even with all the AI and all these AI systems out there. So that's what we're encouraging. Keep on writing, keep on developing your work, keep on creating, remain relevant.
I agree with you 100%. Let's drill down a little bit into the difference between science fiction and science, or fiction and reality.
Okay.
So first of all, you and I may have discussed this before for a whole variety of reasons, including what Stephen Hawking was talking about, that the universe would fall apart if there was time travel. I think time travel is fabulous science fiction. I don't think it's ever going to happen in reality. As far as alternate histories are concerned, they are intellectually wonderful, but I'd like to see it proven. As far as intelligent beings from outer space, I don't know why they're not yet here if they exist. They somehow missed, our planet or whatever it is, but there's a possibility of that. But talking about this movie that you're featuring in this edition of the Philip K. Dick Film Festival that deals with age regression.
Past
Knowing,
life regression,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, knowing you and knowing all the things that you've been into, and our listeners and viewers should just look up Dan Abella's writing. He's written all kinds of fascinating books. This is in addition to what Dan has been doing with the Philip K. Dick Film Festival. So my question to you, Dan, is, and I have a feeling I know the answer, but I'd like to hear you elaborate on it. Do you believe in age regression? Can it really happen? And I don't mean just like, the psychological thing of, well, we'll take you back to an earlier age and the psychologist is getting you in touch with your memories. I mean, really regressing to an earlier age where you almost become that person again.
Well, from my experience with, because I've done work hypnotic, not quite past life regression, but I believe there are a lot of these are different models of the mind. The mind still is probably the most mysterious aspect of who we are. Even this stage of the game, we really don't know what consciousness is and how it erupts, and so on. So, do I believe in past? I believe. Do I believe in past life regression? I believe that the data that comes out from these procedures is very useful, and it can help clients lead better lives. And I've seen it firsthand. For instance, I did, and this is subject for one subject one day. Is I actually did a regression. One day there was this woman that came to me, and I tried these various hypnotic processes, and none of them seemed to work. She said she was insisting that she had been the victim of a satanic ritual abuse going back 2,000 years. 2000. So at that point, I could have just dismissed the whole thing as complete nonsense. I said, or just going with what she was saying and see how far the rabbit hole goes, right? So I decided to go apply the technique of past life, which is fairly standard all the way. I went generate. Apparently, her sometime in the past, sometime in ancient Rome, all right. Had there been some sort of ritual that had been passed from generation to generation, and she was like the recipient of this ritual, and of course her life was all messed up. So I was asking myself, I could spend the next few hours figuring out what this is, or just give it to somebody else who works on past life. So I did work on her, and I was working with her for about 8 hours nonstop because I was so intrigued. When I get into something, I can do 8 hours straight. But at the end, I mean, I did what I refer to as a cleanup of the past life. or her experience. And at the end, her experience, she felt much better. I mean, like a lot of her symptoms disappeared. And I did a follow up with her a few months ago, a year later. She's still doing great because she believes that. So as long as that belief is there, changes. If I was to say, no, what's happening in your life is the only thing that matters, that belief exists prior to that. So unless that belief is tackled, I was gonna waste my time. So I acted as if this is something as if it's real, and the result is she leads a much better life. I mean, I think the one thing that we all need to remember, especially with a lot of the soft, quote unquote, soft sciences, is that if you help someone become a better human, that is, they feel better about their life and others, you've done your job. Whether it's real or not, you can prove scientifically, oh, this is not real or not. But if they still remain miserable, are you doing a better job? I mean, the Buddha says that the goal of us is to end human suffering, to help with human suffering. So if I can help someone with their suffering and feel that their life, because for a moment I play that role, so be it. So as for my thoughts on past life, well, it's interesting. At first, a lot of people in the Christian community say, well, by the way, 40% of Christians believe that there is past life. I mean, that in reincarnation, because, it's not dogma. But even within the Christian world, there's something called purgatory. Now, purgatory is this place that exists between earth and heaven, or between, and it's a place where you get cleaned up. So who knows? Maybe what purgatory is send you back to another life. I have no idea. Well, I guess we'll find out when I get there, or we go. But my goal is, these religions are very different, but at the end, there's an attempt to try to resolve the issues people have. So I feel that I haven't decided on whether or not it exists or not, but I do know that many people do act as if it's true, and when that's tackled, they feel much better. Is it a belief? Maybe. Yes. Is it true? Maybe. Either one, I feel that the goal as healers, or to help people, is to help them feel better about themselves. And they want to go, they're big communities of past life regression people, and that's my short end description.
No, well, listen, I think that's very interesting. Look, I'm a writer too, and I get completely, because this is one of the main reasons that I enjoy writing so much. You get to live another life when you're writing, in whatever the characters are that you are writing. I probably told you the story. I tell everyone the story probably 10 or 20 times, the same story, that when I had finished writing my first novel, The Silk Code, which features a New York City forensic detective, Dr. Phil D'Amato, who gets involved in science fictional stories, I left the manuscript on the kitchen table. I wake up, the next morning, and who's sitting at the table? My then 11-year-old daughter, and she's reading, the novel, and she says two things. First, she says, "Daddy, this is the best novel I ever read." And I tried in vain to get Tor, my publisher, to put that on the back of the book as a blurb, but they said no. But
Right.
then my daughter said, "Daddy, Phil D'Amato is just like you." In other words, the character is just like me. And then I had to think about, gee, I do have a couple of racy scenes in there. Now my daughter has read that. She thinks that's just like me. But the point, obviously, is I think all writers feel this. It is a psychological, when it works, very refreshing, invigorating, liberating feeling to write about a character and put yourself into that character, and thereby, in effect, live another life.
Yeah.
But it's a fictional life. And in terms of age regression, what you just said certainly shows that you are a commendable therapist. You're focused in the case that you just told us about, on making this person feel better. You were gratified when that was the result of your talking to her, taking what she was saying seriously, exploring it. And it's a wonderful thing to help another human being. And by the way, that's also one of the reasons why many people write. You want to make other people happy. That's something that makes any normal human being happy in return. But my question still remains, and I think your answer is you're not sure.
No, I haven't decided. Yes, I
Okay,
don't.
you haven't
I'm
decided.
agnostic on that. Yeah.
You're agnostic. Okay. But if you had to say one thing or another right now, you had to put your money down.
We'll
This,
have to talk about it after the movie.
okay.
After the movie, we'll talk about it.
All right.
But I would say that, look, that the one thing that we need to all understand is that, as perhaps through the internet, that people have strange experiences all the time now. And what's classified as consensus reality falls short of what a lot of people experience, and they live, and whether it be the UAPs or other non-human interactions. So I think that as scientists, we should explore these things seriously and not think, oh, this whole thing, these people are smoking too much weed, or they're drunk, or swamp gas, because that's actually insulting to people who are, some of them who are highly intelligent and are very well. And to say, well, they're just hallucinating. That's just putting another word on something people don't understand. So we really need to understand that when it comes to the world of the mysterious, to stay open and explore it. I mean, and I think that's that way we can advance ourselves. Say, okay, like 200 or 300 years ago, we had approached someone and says, listen, I'm gonna have this device and I'm gonna help you connect. You'll be able to talk to this device. They'll think this is kind of magic. So how is it? I'm talking to this device and someone on the other side of the ocean, and yet look at today. So that kind of openness of mind, which I think a lot of scientists they close themselves, especially the ones from certain groups, too much for that. And I think I clue. I mean, we got to have the scientific method. That's essential, and that's very important. But I think we should really study in a very non-biased way the the Forteana, the kind of experiences people have, whether it be UAPs or encounters with other things, because I think that there's something else that's being ignored. And sometimes scientists will say, you speak to them privately, they'll say, yeah, there's something to it. But if I was to open my mouth, I would lose all the respect from my peers, and I would be, and that's at the root of a lot of problems. Is this fear of being an outsider, and especially if you live on your reputation. Yes, I understand that, but I think that we should, at the very least, remain open and explore these things. But the world is very mysterious, and science hasn't even begun to explain a fraction of the totality of human existence. I mean, it's great, but it's just a fraction. Just to think about what's possible. I remember Arthur C. Clarke talks about an advanced technology civilization so advanced that it would be seen as magic. And that's the kind of attitude we should have when we explore science fiction. I always say science fiction is the science of tomorrow, or maybe the science of maybe an hour from now. But I mean, at the rate we're going, look at the way we talk about AI right now. I mean, 10 years ago, when we started the festival, 20 years ago, 12 years, 13 years ago, this idea that we're going to be talking about AIs if it's happening, not just AI, but sentient. And many people are saying that's unheard of. It's just, wow, come on, you're crazy. That's not how it happened. That's for the movies. That's science fiction. But look, so I think that, and that's it. That's what makes this world a very interesting place to be in right now. But we gotta, as PKD used to say, we gotta keep a critical eye and always question everything. Question nonstop. Like PKD, he could have thought that he had a mystical breakthrough, that it was God was telling him, but always throughout his process, he questioned all these different things, whether it was schizophrenic, psychotic episode, or maybe it was a revelation, or maybe he had an impacted tooth and messed up his brain, Who knows? But that's important too. To have that exploration of reality, but keep questioning. To have both at the same time. If you just accept anything that people, then you'll just be like, you just won't have a ground, right? You believe anything. But if a person just questions everything and rejects because then that puts you in another place. So have that combination. It's really a good one for us to keep growing as human beings, as a species, and not to think that we know it all. Just remember the early 19th century physicists says we understand the world. That's it. It's over. And look what happened. 10 years later, we had quantum mechanics, general relativity, and everything got turned upside down. We still have not recovered from that revolution. We still don't understand what quantum mechanics is. I mean, really don't. And some people think it's a statistical algorithm. Others say it's data. Others say it's just an actual interpretation of reality. We don't know.
Yeah.
Speak to some physicists will say one thing, another one say, but they all say it works though. It works. That's one thing they all agree on.
Well, one of the things I love about quantum mechanics, I'm sure you're aware of it, is that at least a part of quantum mechanics suggests that we can influence something that could be a million miles away from us just by thinking about it. And
Yeah, entanglement. Yeah.
if that's right, if we have a quantum entanglement with that particle or whatever. But listen, I do agree with you seriously on the fundamental point that we, even in this year where we have all of this, as you correctly said, impressive and for some people frightening developments in AI, although I'm not the least bit frightened, I'm
Yeah.
happy about these developments. But, if you think about it, no one has really a clear explanation of what religion refers to as a soul,
Yeah.
what if you're an atheist or an agnostic, just like how this intelligence arises in our species. And it is fascinating, if you look at chimpanzees, if you look at orangutans, if you look at any of the great apes, if you look at what dolphins do, there are other animals that do display some intelligence,
Right.
but none of them are able to do what you and I are doing right now because they're just totally incapable of inventing anything like that. So everyone says, wow, because a chimpanzee with a stick can like fish, for some bugs or something in the mud. So that is very impressive. Good for the chimps. We have to give them credit for it.
Gotta give them credit.
But
Yeah.
it's, but it's so far away from what we're able to do. And so because that is essentially still unexplained, I think you're right that we have to keep the door open for unconventional explanations, which seem unconventional only because we know so little about
So
that.
little, exactly.
Right.
And you
So
gotta stay open. Yeah.
that's right. All right. So, any final words you want to share with us about the festival, about what you're doing, about what's going on in the world? No, I'm only kidding. We don't want to. It would take more than a few minutes, but about the festival.
Just for those who really want good old sci-fi and indie sci-fi with a twist, definitely show up. Show up in person because there's one thing to have a nice talk on Zoom, but when you're in person, that energy flow. There's something there that's missing. That people will feed off. And as a community of sci-fi, souls, I think it's important for other people to be aware there are other people that think like you, that think that it has that exploratory vibe. And I think it's a good place. I think New York is perfect for the PKD because I consider New York City the center of the matrix. The center of all the show and glitz and see what's real in that. And that's why, if it's no accident that the PKD started here in New York City. Man, it spread, it's obviously spreading to other parts of the world where there are festivals in France and Germany. But I think it's a good idea for people just to show up, and I think they'll have a good time. They'll meet other filmmakers. They'll meet and they'll just feel like they're part of a larger community. And that's really at the end, we're social creatures, and and we really do enjoy, as within limits, the company of others, and we feed off that. And I think that's something we all need to remember, and not just be slave to our phones, which are very useful, but I think there are limits to that. So that's pretty much it for me.
All right. Well, I'm certainly going to be there at the festival, and it was great talking to you again.